And I heard about this guy, this man, who was a Jew, who was very far away from the community. Very far away from the community. One day, all of a sudden, he starts coming to synagogue faithfully every Saturday morning, week after week after week. The rabbi was impressed. So the rabbi went to talk to this man and said, I can't even tell you how happy it makes me to see you and your wife coming to synagogue every Saturday. What made you change your mind? And the man says, well, it's all a question of choices. Instead of going every Saturday fishing and then listening to my wife's sermons, I'd rather have yours. So, I want to talk to you today about, do I really have to tell you? That's the title of the sermon. Do I really have to tell you? Have you ever heard this before? You never had anybody ever say, do I really have to tell you what to do? Never? If you never heard it, you're my hero. But let me explain why I want to call this sermon, do I really have to tell you? In this week's Parsha, of course, 10 Commandments. But before the 10 Commandments, there was an episode where Moses went up to the mountains. Sometimes we miss that we always feel that the first time that Moses went to the mountain was to receive the tablets. That's not true. That was, I believe, the third time that he went. But this parsha at the beginning, Moses went up to the mountains. And there is something very weird in the way the Torah tells us what happened. It says there, and Moses went up to God. And God called Moses from the top of the mountain. And I realize that the order of the words is off here. He should say first, God called Moses, and then Moses went up the mountains. But why would he say here that Moses went up to the mountains and after that, God called to him? Why do we have it backwards? Well, I believe that what is happening here is a lesson for all relationships. For all relationships. In this case, we are learning something between the relationship between Moses and God. But this principle, the general principle involved, encapsulated here, could be useful for all of us in all our relationships. Because here what happened, this is what the rabbis say, that is that Moses went up to the mountains before God had to tell him to come up to the mountains. And this is something that is always very helpful in our relationships, and is to develop some kind of sense of anticipation, where when we know our loved ones so well that we can anticipate what they need or what they want. But in order to do that, you really have to know the person. So what happened is, we have to remember what happened the first time that Moses went up that mountain. And that is according to the rabbis, about a year ago from this parsha. And that is when Moses went up the mountain and he encountered God, the burning bush. We forget that the burning bush was at the top of Mount Sinai. So Moses encountered God at the burning bush there, and God told Moses at that encounter, in the future, I'm going to liberate the people of Israel from Egypt, and you are going to come back to this mountain to serve me. That's why I remember when Moses used to go to Pharaoh all the time and said, let my people go so we can go and serve God. Moses was talking about himself, going back to the mountain to serve God. So from that first encounter, Moses was counting the hours to be able to go back to that place to serve God. So God didn't have to call Moses. Moses already knew deep inside his heart what he had to do to make God happy. Without any kind of reminder, he went up to the mountains. And I'm telling you, developing a sense of anticipation is a wonderful thing in a relationship. And I'm not talking just about our spouses. Sometimes it happens with our kids as well. You know, it's very common. Every time myself or my wife, Ashira, we go on a trip, we always buy something for Ronen. Did he ask us that he wanted something when we come back? No. But we already know that when we come back from a trip, he will be expecting something. So before we get the words, we anticipate that and we buy something nice for him. And this is something that it works in all relationships, especially with God. I don't know if you remember when God revealed to Abraham, God said to Abraham, walk before me. For the first time, he said, walk before me, in the sense, try to anticipate what I want. And I learned recently that in every healthy relationship, you need to develop 5 A's. 5 A's. And those are appreciation. It's important to appreciate what the other person does or brings to the relationship. The next one is attention. Right? One way to have a strong relationship is to develop a sense of attention, to pay attention what is going on with the other person in front of you. The third A is affection. There are certain things that are expected for you to do. The fourth A is anticipation. You know the person so well that you can anticipate their needs. The fifth A is all the time. And I also heard that if we fail at these 5 A's, we have a 6th A, that is alimony. Just kidding. But again, these 5 A's applies not only to our spouses, it also applies to God. It also applies to our relationship with God. To appreciate God, to pay attention to what God has to say, to express our affection to God. Remember when we said the Shema Israel, Ve'avta et Adonai Elohech, and you shall love Adonai your God. And then anticipation. Sometimes we have to figure out, before God tells us what to do, what God wants us to do. And this has to be done all the time. But at the same time, I realize that this principle applies, for example, to our love and to our connection with the land of Israel. That we have to go through the first A and appreciate what Israel means to us. And we have to pay attention to everything that happens in Israel. We have to demonstrate our affection to do something for Israel. And we have to do it with anticipation before there is a real need. We don't need a war to send money to Israel. We have to demonstrate sometimes some anticipation and to do it out of our good heart. But perhaps the most important is all the time. Because sometimes we do it for a little bit. We connect with Israel for a little bit, and then we forget. And we move on. We can never move on from Israel. We have to do it all the time. So, my friends, this parsha is teaching us something very important. Very important. Of everything that we have to do for people, the kind of relationship we have to have with God, and the kind of relationship we have to have with Israel. Because if we fail, then we are in debt. And we don't want to do that. We want to be always there for our loved ones, for our God, and for our Holy Land. Shabbat Shalom.